Hello and welcome to this very exciting video. This is going to be the first part of a semi-medium long tutorial series on using Clay and the C programming language to create UI applications. And Clay is something that has been quite interesting to me since it's an immediate mode layout GUI kind of framework, and it's super easy to work with once you understand it, and it's super easy to create very cool and reactive UI applications. So I'm going to show you let's go. So I have laid out all of the different parts that we will need. So starting up in this video, we are going to set up Clay plus C and set up a development environment where we can build and run. And after that, we perhaps in this video or perhaps in another part, we are going to, in this code, initialize Clay and initialize Raylib as the renderer, and creating a main loop for our application. And kind of moving on from that, I think it's a good idea to understand the absolute basics of how Clay works. That won't take very long since it's pretty easy to understand the basics, but we will go through how that works. And after that, we can create the layout of our application. I'm going to show you what kind of application we're going to create. And after we have our basic layout, we're going to move on to rendering text. And from text, we can create buttons. And from buttons, we can then create logic, which will be tied into our UI. And after all of that, we can work on creating the reactive part of the UI. And lastly, we're going to create and couple together a little rover game. So this is the UI I have come up with as a wireframe. So as you can see, it will be a semi-serious application and it will be called Mars Rover Control Panel. So as you can see, this UI kind of contains all the basic stuff you will need. It has buttons, it has some text, it has a footer and header, a main part, and in the middle here we are going to actually use Raylib to render a game. So we're going to show how to kind of create a UI plus something that is game-like. So all of these in the end, I hope, all of these buttons will have semi-complicated logic coupled to them. So we will have some sort of game state. And all of these UI elements will be connected to the game state. Yeah. So kind of zooming in on the first part here. Setting up Clay plus C development environment. So some kind of prerequisites is that you have either, from my experience setting up, the easiest way to do it on Windows is through WSL, which is the Windows subsystem for Linux. So kind of I will put the links in the description for this. But set up if you're on Windows, set up your WSL terminal as I have here. So you have something that is Linux-like, or if you're on a Mac, that should work just the same as I'm doing over here in the terminal. Or if you're already using Linux, you should be good. And another prerequisite for actually building the application is that I will put the links down in the description. Let's see if they have. No. But you will need both. Let's see, Clang, GCC, LLVM, I think. You need to install the basic build tools, and there is actually a package called Build Essentials. Let's see here. So this I will also put in the description. This is if you have never done any kind of development using C before, you need to install the Build Essential, which contains, as I said, GCC and a couple of other packages to compile C and C++ programs. Yeah. So if you're in your terminal, I have my home folder called dev for all development related projects, and in here we can create a directory. Let's create. I'm going to name my project for now temp, since I already have created something in my directory. So we can create temp, and right now it's empty. So let's get out of there. And what I have done is also I have git cloned the Clay repository. So I have just put this here, copied, and I have done git clone to get the Clay repository on my computer. Yeah. So all you really have to do is copy the clay.h file, and if optional, but for us we're going to use Raylib, so they have actually made a Raylib renderer which we will also copy. So we can do that. If I show you now how I would do this, I would use the cp command for copy, and I would copy it into temp, and I would also copy cd into renderers, and I would also do copy Raylib to temp. So now I have inside my project folder, I have both the clay.h file and the Raylib file. And after this we can create a main.c file. And if we do code here now, so here's really all the source files we will need. The clay.h, which is Clay is a single file library, and the Raylib folder contains the C file for the Raylib renderer and the actual Raylib header library and the Raymath library. Yeah, so that's the source files, and what we now actually need is some way to build this, and luckily for us, Clay also has some examples. So if we go into examples and we go into Raylib sidebar scrolling container, they have a cmake lists.txt. So if we kind of open this file, here, so we can copy this file. Again, I am in the Clay repository, in examples, in Raylib sidebar scrolling container and the cmake list.txt. I can copy this file. I can go back to my temp, the actual project folder that we're going to have, and I can copy this source into cmake list.txt. here. So I'm going to rename the project here to something else. For now, temp. You can name it whatever you want. Maybe Mars rover control panel or something to describe the actual application. So if we look in this CMake lists file, we can see that they are doing, they're of course actually kind of pulling in the Raylib library from their GitHub, so we're getting the latest Raylib build. And let's see, we can remove this since we don't need that. Let's see, so they are adding all the header files here, and then they are adding the source file, our main.c, declaring Raylib here, and somewhere down here we are actually, they have something called resources. So they are copying resources, which could be like images or fonts, into the build folder. So let's create a folder called resources. We will eventually need this, of course. But for now we can leave it empty and just create it in the root. Yeah, so that should be it. This is all you need to do. And now we can move on to creating and setting up Clay. So here again in our main.c file with our CMake lists file, we can kind of start to code. So I'm going to pull up my reference. Let's see here. Here's my reference. Let me open this up, pull it to the side. Yeah. So let's start up by including our relevant files. So this will be Raylib and raylib.h, and then we need to include Clay. And after that we can include the Raylib renderer. Clay renderer Raylib. Let's see. So the file inside the Raylib folder. And something that the Clay library does is that it requires us to define Clay implementation. And kind of what this does, if you go into the Clay file here and we look it up, as the name implies, if you don't define in your source folder where you include, if you do not define Clay implementation, it won't actually define the implementation of all the functions here. I guess, yeah, these functions here, the public API functions, which can be useful if you're in another folder or file where you only want the definitions or the types. So you don't have to include all the implementation definitions. But in our main, of course, we want the actual implementation included. Yeah, so let me increase the size a bit. Moving on, we define our main entry point. Sorry, here. And we can start off by just printing hello Clay. And let's include standard IO here. Yeah, so let me cd into the project folder. So I named my project this, but the setup is just as I described to the right here with the Raylib folder and the clay.h file and the CMake lists. And doing this, I can let me just remove my previous build. Yeah, that's clean. So what I usually do, what you could do is just run cmake dot to run the cmake in the source or the root directory. And what this will do, it will generate using whatever default generator you have. I'm using make. It will put all the files in the root, and that can be kind of messy. So what I usually do is I make something called a build folder. I cd into the build folder and I run cmake one level up. So this will take some time, but what this will do, it will create a build folder, and it will put all of the dependencies and the output into this one build folder instead of just kind of littering it all over our root directory. But you can do whichever way you feel. It doesn't really matter at all. So now I think it's what's taking time here is pulling down the Raylib repository. There we go. So build files have been written to /build. And if we do ls now, in my case, since I have the make generator configured for cmake, I get this make file, which I can run. Just do make, enter. So now it's building both the Raylib and our application, which includes the Clay header file. And it was successful. So if we do ls again, we can see that we have actually an executable. So if we run that executable, we get hello Clay. So that's good. It seems to be working at least. We have our we have both the Raylib library, the renderer, and the Clay, and it's compiling correctly. So let's move on to initializing the Clay library. So first off, I'm going to define some constants up here. I'm going to define I'm going to define something called screen width. I'm going to put that at this number, and we also have screen height, which will be this number. I just googled 16 by 9 resolution sizes, and this felt kind of good in terms of the size. Yeah. So the first thing we will do is actually call into Clay Raylib initialize, and this function is defined here in the renderer. And this all this really does is just call init window from the Raylib function, which will initialize. We can read here. It will initialize the window and the OpenGL context into which Clay will render. And we also have some optional kind of config flags here. So this takes in an integer. It takes in screen width. So we cast the float to an int. We do the same to the height. And the title, I can leave this maybe as Mars rover control panel. Flags, I'm going to leave it 0 for now. So this basically init Raylib library. So with the Raylib initialized, we can init Clay library, or framework perhaps, just init Clay actually. So what we will call is, we will call Clay initialize, and this takes in something called a Clay arena and something called a Clay dimensions. And the first argument, Clay Arena, if we look here, it just contains like the main part here is the capacity and the memory pointer. So what we need to do is allocate some amount of memory into which the Clay framework can put their stuff. And luckily for us, again, Raylib provides something called Clay min memory size. So we can kind of automatically get back the number of bytes that Clay will need, and from this we can create the argument Clay Arena and call it memory arena. And as I said, we will allocate this amount of memory, and the, let's see, that was memory, and like this, and actually the memory here will be the malloc from Clay memory size. Makes sense? So we retrieve the number of bytes, we pass that into the arena, and we also pass in the malloc return value, which malloc just allocates X number of bytes onto the heap for us. So we have our arena, so we can pass our memory arena, and then we will pass our Clay dimensions. So we will create Clay dimensions, call that dimensions, and this takes in a width and a height in float, so that's why I created them as floats earlier. And height will be screen height. Super easy, let's do that. And pass that also into the initialize. That's it. So memory arena and dimensions passed into Clay initialize. Boom, done. Yeah, that's it for initializing. Basically, we have some more stuff to do, but for now, that's it. So this is our main application loop, into which we will put all of our render stuff. We will put some kind of logic code here. Yeah. So if we have any more kind of initialization to do here, we'll put this here before we go into the while loop. And for how long will we loop? It could be while true, but that creates kind of a problem, since we want the application to run for as long as the Raylib window is open. And Raylib provides something called window should close, which is a function that returns true if we can read here, or maybe not. We can go into raylib.age and here and check if application should close. Key escape pressed or window close icon is clicked. So while not, put the exclamation mark here to kind of invert it, and saying while we don't want to close the window, run the program. Makes sense. That's a very basic. This is how you always do the loop in Raylib. Yeah. So we're not going to create some. We're not going to actually do any UI stuff in this part. But what we can do is kind of at least do the super basic stuff. So we can call the Raylib function called begin drawing, and we can of course close that by end drawing. So these two are Raylib functions that you have to call before you do any kind of rendering to the screen. And in here there's another Raylib function called clear background, and we can clear it using some color. I don't know, let's do yellow. And that's kind of it. And here to do is actually render the clay layout. So if we build this using make, build, and then we run, we get this amazing looking 1408 by 792 application window. And something interesting, right now this window is actually fully resizable, but we can prevent that by passing in a configuration flag here. So if we pass in flag window, I guess I'm not sure if pass in. Let's check what kind of flags there are. By default, all flags are set to 0. Yeah, so actually what I wanted to do was pass this flag, the borderless windowed mode. So running make, running the program. Yeah, so if you're on, I think if you're on native Linux or if you're actually using Windows, this would create a window without this kind of top bar here. And that's what I want. We can also do some other flags. So pipe, meaning like combine. I think and, this is bit and operator. Or maybe bit, I don't know. This just combine the bits basically. So combining the bits from that and then combining the bits from vsync int. And we also want the MSSA for X. Enabling vsync, pretty basic, and also enabling MSAA for just a sharper kind of looking graphics. Let's see if there's something else we want to do. Yeah, another useful function from Raylib, you can put this under here, is something called set target FPS. And you can pass whatever you want to here. I'm going to pass 144 since, let's see, yeah, since we have passed the vsync hint to the configuration, I'm not entirely sure how this interacts with setting a target FPS. I haven't measured the FPS. Is there a function for? Yeah, there is. Maybe I should do that, but I'm just going to limit it to 144, which is the refresh rate of my monitor. Yeah, so that's it, and hopefully this short program, like 43 lines, you're able to run it and compile, and if you can do that, we are ready to move on to actually creating the UI. This UI here. So in the second part, we're going to focus on just remove, if you in your head kind of remove all the text, all the buttons, the graphics, just create all the different sections. So the header, this side container, the render window, and the right side window, and the bottom footer. And we can kind of go through how you create that, and you will see how simple and easy Clay is to use. Yeah. Cool, so we've been going for half an hour. So if you have any questions, or if anything is not working, feel free to ask, and I will try to help you. And I will put the relevant links, as I said, for the build essential, all the things you need to install for actually building, I will put in the description. And part 2 should be out tomorrow or maybe later tonight. Yeah, thank you. Good luck.